everyone and welcome back to my channel. So I made the dress I'm wearing right now in a previous video and I had a lot of fabric left over, so I decided to make a matching bag to go along with it. I'm also going to add a zipper pocket inside, so I'm also going to need a zipper, and I'm going to use some interfacing and a lining as well. And if you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you would give it a like and subscribe to the channel. And let's get started! The pattern for this bag was fairly simple because it was just a bunch of rectangles. I cut out the main body pieces, the lining, the inside pouch pieces, and the handles. It was very convenient because the curtains I used to make this already came with 2 layers of fabric, and I was able to make this out of scrap fabric that I had left over from the dress. In case you're interested, these are the exact measurements I used. Next, I put some interfacing on all of my patterned pieces, including the main body pieces, the handles, the inside pouch, and the top of the inside of the bag. And this is what all the pieces looked like laid out next to each other. Then I took the biggest patterned pieces and the biggest lining pieces and cut out a 5 cm by 5 cm square from both sides of the bottom edge. I layered the 2 pieces on top of each other to make it easier so that I only had to cut it out once per set. Next, I made the handles, which are the wider strips of fabric we cut out. I ironed them in half and then opened them so I could iron each side to the center crease. I folded it all up so that it was folded into 4s and stitched along both edges so that the handles were complete. And I did this to both handles. I marked the top centers of the pieces we cut squares from and measured 5 cm from the center mark. I placed the handles so that the inside of them lined up with the mark and pinned them in place before sewing them in place with a 1/2 cm seam allowance. Make sure your handles don't get twisted and that about 1 cm of the handle is sticking up from the edge of the fabric. Then I placed the 2 pieces right sides together and sewed along the sides and bottom with a 1 cm seam allowance. I ironed the seam allowance open and away from each other and took the open square on the bottom edges and opened them up so that I could line up the seams to put them together and sew along the edge with a 1 cm seam allowance so that now it was a bag with no holes on the bottom. I went on to making the inside pouch. I did this by taking the main piece and placing it on the table with the right side facing me, and then placing the zipper right side down with the zipper on the right hand side, and then put the lining on top. I sewed all along that top edge with a 1 cm seam allowance. I ironed the fabric away from the zipper and top stitched it in place. Then I took the bottom of each piece of fabric and brought it up to the other side of the zipper with nothing sewn onto it. I did the same thing of sewing the fabrics in place onto the zipper with a 1 cm seam allowance. And this is how it looks now. It can now be turned inside out. Make sure to top stitch the side we just sewed like we did for the other side. I then sewed up the 2 sides to complete the pouch. If your zipper is too long like mine was, make sure that the handle of the zipper is between the ends of the pouch and not hanging out before sewing the 2 sides. And make sure that your needle doesn't hit the zipper and bend like mine did, because mine hit the zipper and so I had to change it. I just cut off the excess to make it easier to sew into the bag. And the pouch part is finished. I really liked how it was coming along, and now it was time to move on to the lining. I took the pocket piece and folded it in half so I could sew all along the open edge. Make sure to keep a section open so that it can be turned inside out. After turning it right side out, I top stitched along the top and placed it 3.5 cm from the top of the lining piece, making sure it was centered. Then I just sewed all along the sides and bottom to complete the pocket. I took the pieces for the top of the lining and placed it right sides together so that I could sew it with a 1 cm seam allowance. I pressed the seam allowance towards the body piece and top stitched the seam allowance in place. And I repeated this for both lining pieces. Now we can put in the pouch. I did this by marking 1.5 centimeters up from the side bottom and placing the bottom of the pouch there, sandwiched between the two lining pieces. I did the exact same thing to both sides so that the pouch was securely in place. I stitched the section where the zipper attached to the lining for extra security because there will be a lot of strain on that area. I sewed it all with a 1 cm seam allowance. And I sewed the bottom together as well. Next, I did the same thing I did earlier where we put the square of the bottom edge together, matching the seams with the seam allowance pressed open to complete the lining portion of the bag. To put the two together, I turned the lining inside out and inserted it into the main bag, which was still turned wrong side out. I pinned all along the top and sewed all across it using a 1 cm seam allowance. Make sure you leave a little bit open so that we can turn it right side out once we're done. Once I turned it right side out, I ironed it so that it would be nicely creased and top stitched all around that edge. And it's finally done! I really like how it turned out and I love how it matches my dress, so I will definitely be using it when I wear the dress. But I think I'll also use it even without the dress because I like it so much. I really hope you enjoyed this video or learned something from it, and if you did, please like and subscribe. See you next time!